Welcome back to the Hidden History Happy Hour Season 3. Alex, can you believe it was more than 3 years ago we started this little adventure?
I'm very proud of it. I enjoyed our little break, but I'm delighted to be back with season three.
Yeah, it's been a minute. A lot going on, which we're not going to talk about because we're about the entertainment. We are having some vodka today in honor of probably the greatest Russian Soviet hero of the Cold War. And for those of you who seem to have forgotten, the Soviet Union was the enemy of the United States and Britain and the West, and Russia was the enemy. This is the context in which we tell the story of the sadly recently deceased hero Oleg Gordievsky, R.I.P. Oleg.
R.I.P. Indeed. Yes, we take and I don't even like vodka, but I do that for the great man.
Fair.
I also tell the story in the first of these books, Lessons from History, about Petrov in the bunker averting nuclear war. He might have another claim to be the greatest hero, but there is no doubt in my mind that one of the greatest friends of the West and a man who risked everything for the betterment of peace amongst the nations was Oleg Gordievsky, an incredibly brave soul. And I told his story in my first book. And of course, when I wrote it, we were all going through coronavirus and lockdown. So in those times, people were quite understandably, as we were told we couldn't leave our homes and so forth, and going through periods of reflection, people were looking back on their past and realizing that there were things in their lives that they regret. And my friends might suggest I'm not the most reflective of people, but I did that. I undertook that exercise and I look back and I realized that there were some people in my life I had been insufficiently rude to. And one of those people was Geoffrey Howe, who was Foreign Secretary at the relevant time of British government. And I really do partially owe that conclusion and the story I'm going to tell to Ben Macintyre, who wrote the brilliant book, The Spy and the Traitor. He is really the definitive historian when it comes to Gordievsky. The point is that in the dark days of Soviet Russia, Oleg Gordievsky was a double agent. He was spying for Britain, and he did so for an entire generation at huge risk to himself. And his cover was blown. He was blown because of a traitor within your CIA, who let the Soviets know that they had someone spying for Britain for them. And he was summoned back to Russia from the United Kingdom in 1985 without explanation, and that is ominous if you are in his position. And he talked to his British handlers and he said, I think I'm blown. I think I've been discovered, but I'm still going to go back to Moscow. Now, bear in mind, he could have claimed asylum in the United Kingdom, never left, and it would have been fine. But he went back because there was still one, a chance that he hadn't been blown. Two, there was a chance that he could still get more secrets for the West by going back if everything was fine, which it just might be. And three, he had enormous stones. He was one of the bravest men the world has ever seen. But as we know, Brian, things were not fine. He was very much blown. And the KGB, having promptly detained him when he arrived back in Moscow, drugged him, questioned him over a long period of time, completely showed their hand. They wrongly then tried to play a long game. He tells his handlers that he tried the traditional sort of bluff and outrage, and he thought, I'm going to break at some point. I can't last. And just when he thought he might give up, he was returned to his flat in Moscow, which of course was bugged. And the Soviets were trying to break him slowly. They thought it might take time, but they reasoned, nobody's ever escaped the USSR. He will, in the end, come round and tell us what we need to know. Or he'll tell a friend in his flat, or whatever it is that we need to get to him. He's not going anywhere. That was logical, but false confidence on their part. So first of all, Gordievsky gave the signal to the MI6, it's our military intelligence service and diplomatic team at the UK Moscow embassy, that he was going to try to escape to Russia. And a plan for that had been in place for literally years. So carefully selected, quietly briefed individuals from within the families of diplomatic community of British civil servants in Moscow had become accustomed to walking week after week, month after month, at a specified time on a specified day, carrying a certain design on their carrier bag, and eating particular chocolate bar to say to their man, "We're here and we're ready to come to get you if you need." Some of them said afterwards they could never eat a Mars bar again as long as they lived. They got sick and tired of this process. But of course, they lived in hope that they would never actually have to do this. They did this year after year for someone they'd never met and thought that they were very unlikely ever to meet. But and of course, having a plan is different to having to actually execute it. Gordievsky puts himself in the right position, indicates he wants to come out to the confectionery chomping Brits, and to execute that plan, the action needed to be signed off at the highest level. And deeply to my country's regret, the highest level was Geoffrey Howe, our foreign secretary at the time. And Howe's position, I think, can be summarized as, gosh, this all sounds a bit awkward, might upset the Russians. Sod it, let him die. But fortunately for us all, and especially for Oleg Gordievsky, above the Geoffrey Howe highest level was Margaret Thatcher tier. And Margaret Thatcher said, "Well, thank you." I paraphrase. "Thank you very much for your interesting advice, Geoffrey. But this man has helped to prevent nuclear war and served the democratic West my entire political life. So we are going to go and get him, and we are going to bring him home." And that is why Gordievsky was smuggled from Soviet Russia in the boot of a diplomat's car. The diplomat's wife, when they were stopped by border guards, getting out and changing the baby's nappy on the boot of the car to put off the sniffer dogs, which worked. And this wonderful couple played Finlandia as they crossed the border into Finland so that Gordievsky in the boot would know that they'd made it. And so no thanks to Geoffrey Howe, Oleg Gordievsky remained alive and well and in my country from that time in the 1980s until this week as we record this episode. And the reason I was saying I'd been insufficiently rude to him is that Geoffrey Howe was a bencher of my Inn of Court, which is a senior member of Middle Temple, which is one of the various great institutions I've been lucky enough to drift through without particular distinction at all. I met him a few times in that role, and I loathed him for his anti-Thatcherism. But I will confess I didn't know this about the Gordievsky episode, and callow youth as I was, and seeking snivelingly to make progress, I failed to voice that disapproval beyond general surliness. And I now, of course, realize I had all the more reason to. But I just, one of my great friends in life is a guy called Jeremy Breyer, who was qualifying the same time as me. And I told this story, and he reminded me that on the all too few occasions that I attended hall, which you're obliged to do for a certain minimum number, so I must have done that minimum number plus one or something, when the whole inn stands up and toasts absent friends, I would always bellow, "Except Geoffrey Howe." So, so I take pride in that. I should also, I mean, Jeremy has gone on to be a KC and as an adornment of his inn, unlike myself. So I was also insufficiently rude, although still very rude to Edward Heath. But that's a story that we can tell on another episode.
Well, it sounds like the insufficiently rude list might be long. Maybe we should have a whole special segment on insufficiently rude. There's so much to say about this, Alex, and some of it's serious, but I want to start with the not serious first. So you have a wonderful young boy in your
I
family,
do.
less than 24 months old. So I would imagine that the story of the baby shitting on the boot of the car is even more poignant to you than it was when you wrote the
Well,
story.
it certainly means I can understand how it could be powerful enough to put off sniffer dogs who are trained specifically to see through illusory odors. The other thing that my boy does is keep me up at night. And that is why I am particularly glad to have our new sponsors, Brian.
Yes. So I want to talk more about Gordievsky, but we have to say this. Such a great thing has happened to us. As you know, we labored at this for 3 years. We've been doing it. We have an amazing new sponsor. It's the Wolf Project, men's cosmetics, which my family, over the past 60 years I've been on the earth, would say I had no familiarity with, and they would have been right. But this job, this taxing job of being the host of a podcast, really takes a toll on you, especially when you got to drink vodka. So,
Especially because you're often drinking it early in the morning to suit my calendar.
correct. The
Yeah,
flagship product.
that's it. The eye roller. which I know I need. But the thing is, Brian, it was kind of an obvious pairing with us because no two people speak more of the kind of Beau Brummel of the airwaves. No one exudes
Fair.
perfection in male grooming more than you and me. Which is obviously a jest. That's not true. But I suppose what the Wolf Project pairing with us shows is that these products are for all people, and guys shouldn't be ashamed of getting a little advantage. The eye roller has some caffeine in it, so not only does it take care of your eye bags, gives you a little lift. I'm going to use mine in the morning, not the evenings, therefore. But having had my sleep disrupted so much, the little eye masks to take away the dark circles, particularly if I've got an early morning meeting, is greatly appreciated too. So thank you very much to the Wolf Project.
Yes, thank you. Welcome the Wolf Project. Not just should we not be embarrassed about it as men, Alex, but I would note to try to pull this together that your queen, I guess at the time, awarded Mr. Gordievsky with the same award that is given to the fictional James Bond, right? Who always looks good no matter what they've just been through. We do not have that luxury, though. We
What's a
need some
good?
help.
I can't remember what Fleming. Was it a Fleming award or is it in the films?
I don't know. I mean, I have it. I'll put it in the. It's like the Order of Saint Peter and Saint Mark, or it's two different saints
Oh,
together.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
But
That's
my point is, we do not. You more than me, but we do not look like James Bond. And I know it's hard for people to believe, but
uh,
I am now in my seventh decade of life, and I'll tell you all something. Uh, the last time you saw us, I wore glasses all the time, as I had done since I was in the fifth grade or something. I had eye surgery. I don't wear glasses anymore, which is generally great, but I noticed big bags under my eyes. And I could do the before and after because when I picked this up 6 weeks ago at Nordstrom's in the United States, available nationwide, check out Nordstrom's for the Wolf products. I looked terrible. And I've been using the eye roller, I've been using the face cleanser, I've been using the aqua gel, and it actually does make a difference. And it makes you feel better first thing in the morning.
well, you're ahead of me, but you can get yours from Amazon in the UK. And in the next episode, we're going to have a discount code for people to use. Um,
So,
shall I tell another story?
please do. Yeah, I did have two other things I want to say about Gordievsky, though, real quick.
Yeah, go.
One is when I was a young intelligence officer for the United States, we were trained to be able to hold out under severe interrogation for a
Right.
certain amount of time. I think that amount is actually still classified, so I'm not going to say how long it is, but it's not very long. And we were directed that at the moment that we had exceeded that time, we could tell everything because the whole idea was they would have protected all the secrets that we knew by that number of hours, right? So
Right.
Gordievsky goes back. He has no idea how long the KGB is going to torture him. He probably thinks it's going to be actually much longer than it was. So the personal courage of this man, who just like John McCain in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam, could have saved himself, went back into the danger. And the espionage business has gotten a bad name recently. People don't take it that seriously. Secrets don't seem to be secrets anymore. It's trivialized. But this person, Oleg Gordievsky, not only helped advantage the West against the Soviet Union, which as a patriotic American, I think is important, but also helped to prevent World War III. So spies don't just steal secrets and conduct
Right.
covert operations. They sometimes help to save the world, as Gordievsky did.
Spot on.
And let's proceed with the next story.
All right, so I was going to tell a story about, and we're going to tell every single story from volume one as we go. This is one we haven't touched on.
Promise.
It's called Where the Heart Flies. Robert the Bruce is regarded in the modern age as a hero amongst Scots. Many people, myself included, had a little Ladybird book growing up. If a British person's listening, and that you remember that echo of Robert the Bruce watching the spider try to spin its web. But he had a record that was really quite unclear to the actual historian. He and his friend Kirkpatrick murdered John Comyn in a church in Dumfries in order to become king. But anyway, Robert the Bruce becomes a leader amongst Scots, and he died of leprosy. or not, depending on who you believe. But anyway, he died. And his heart was removed and placed into a silver casket, which his faithful supporter James Douglas sought to take to Jerusalem, which is where Robert the Bruce wanted to make pilgrimage. Alas, the way you'd go to Jerusalem from the United Kingdom, from Scotland, quite often went from Spain in those times, and you had so I'm sure people had very nice time on the routes, and sometimes not very nice time. And for Douglas, it was the not very nice. He got into a real fight in Spain, and depending on your preference, he was either caught in a weak spot in battle, or his Spanish allies deserted him, deserted the field. Hard pressed by enemies all about him, Douglas took the casket from the chain around his neck and threw it into the horde that was pressing upon him. I like to think, because I'm a romantic, he threw it towards Jerusalem. But anyway, he throws it into the crowd and he cries, lead us as you always did. I follow you or I die. And sadly for Douglas, it was option B. So in due course, both Robert the Bruce's heart and James Douglas's body were recovered from the battlefield by their allies. And Douglas was buried at Dunfermline Abbey, which is where Robert the Bruce's body lay. He was buried with his great leader. And in accordance with his wishes, Robert the Bruce's heart was interned at Melrose Abbey, where it was then lost and rediscovered in the 1990s. And so it was reburied with a new marker on it in 1998, which is why I came to know the story.
It's a sentimental story. It's probably mostly true, but it's a good one. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the story that we did about Patti Smith, the American rocker Patti Smith.
Yes, Stones and Earth.
And how she went to the prison after her poet idol was dead and tried to honor him, even though she knew he would never find out. I kind of screwed that up, but you get the idea.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Okay.
You hark back to that Patti Smith story very well, and people can see it in the list of episodes. Okay, I've got time. I'm going to do one more.
Yes, but I want to say, because of the miracles of technology in real time, I can tell you, Alex, that in 2007, Oleg Gordievsky was honored by Queen Elizabeth II by being made a companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George, which is the same honor held by fictional spy James Bond.
CMG. Sorry, yes.
Speaking of books, before we finish up, because I know we're going to have a lot of new viewers, you're watching the Hidden History Happy Hour with him, Alex, and me, Brian. It's based on Alex's best-selling books, Lessons from History, and the cleverly titled More Lessons from History. We are going to continue this journey, thanks in part to Wolf Products, until we get every single story told and the stories that are being written even as we speak. So check us out on YouTube, Hidden History Happy Hour. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you're enjoying this, tell your friends. Alex, time for one more.
Thank you very much. This is the story that I chose to tell at the book launch for my first history book. It's a story about the poet Gavin Ewart, who wrote a series of tremendous poems. There's if people are watching on YouTube, the collected Ewart 33 to 80. There's 80 to 90. Here with a rather saucy cover is his penultimate poems. So I'm quite the fan. He was highly rated by Philip Larkin, who I find a pretty infallible recommendation in such things, which is indeed why I really was first switched on to Ewart. And he wrote wittily and funnily, and he talks a lot about sex. Now, the left will always want to tell me, as I'm someone on the right, that he wrote during his time at Cambridge that our country, my country, the United Kingdom, was smug, half alive, and semi-fascist. And he thought that, I think, both before and after the Second World War. But nevertheless, I still really like him and his writings. And he served my country in the Royal Artillery in the Second World War, like my step-grandfather. And he was precociously published as a poet before the war. But he found he couldn't write after the war, given the experience he'd had in it, nor for a long time after it. He returned to poetry and national fame and was prolific in his later years. Anyway, and I've never known how to pronounce Nigel Spivey, I think, not Spivey, which would be an insult in my country. I'm pretty sure it's Spivey, of the Financial Times, met with Ewart, who at that time was 79, at the Cafe Royal venue in London. The Financial Times runs a very famous Lunch with the FT series where you get to see what they ate and how much it cost, and sometimes the person will say why they chose to eat there, and mostly it's an interrogation of an interesting person of the day. But the FT reports that the main item that they had was alcohol. Gavin Ewart began with several Negronis, not one warm-up aperitif. He had several Negronis, and they pushed on in similar style as they got into their first course. And late in the afternoon, the two men finally poured themselves out of the Cafe Royal and went their separate ways. And Spivey reports the next day he was telephoned by Mrs. Ewart. When you get that call through from the switchboard, you must think, "Oh God, I'm in real trouble." And Mrs. Ewart said to him, "There are two things you need to know. The first is that Gavin came home happier than I've seen him in a long time yesterday. And the second, and you are not to feel bad about this, is that he died this morning." Now, that is, of course, a point about a life well lived and a good death. But it's most of all a vignette about the magnificent, redoubtable, kind and thoughtful Mrs. Ewart, isn't it? Who thinks to phone the journalist who was with him the night he died.
Well, I happen to hope and expect to live forever, Alex, but if I don't, I hope that in Hemingway fashion, you and I will have been poured out of a bar following a bunch of Negronis the day before. And
Absolutely. That story put me in mind. I had a little postscript. Um, Ed Murrow had that long-standing American radio program, This I Believe, and a British author called Kate Chisholm quoted from it in a magazine we have in the UK here called The Spectator. And she quotes this housewife from Murrow was great at getting vox pops and ordinary people expressing themselves. And this housewife in Virginia said her husband had dropped dead after laughing with her at a joke she'd just made. "Louise, you gorgeous fool," he said, and then he died.
there's worse ways to go. Listen, now that we've both been put back on notice of our own mortality, uh,
Mm.
I want to start a new segment here that I stole from Esquire magazine from about 30 years ago, which featured some good poetry as well. And the segment was called Offered Without Context. So occasionally I plan to offer some things on this program without context. And here is my offering for today. Being faced with a discussion of our own mortality, I think there's never been a better time to, as an American citizen, thank the United Kingdom, Canada, Denmark, Germany, France, every other country, Australia, New Zealand, that has fought alongside of us for the last 100 years, mostly because we said so. That has not gone unappreciated, at least not by me. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you saying that. Of course, neither World War was commenced for that reason. Indeed, you joined both rather later than we might have liked. But that is a very kind and generous comment, and I think it's time for Europe to spend a bit more money and seek to provide our portion of the shield, the umbrella, in the way that you have for so long. So, in the same reciprocal spirit, to America.
Godspeed, my friend. See y'all next time.
See you next time. Cheers.